What's up, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. It's week 2 ranks. I'm Chris Welsh, and today I got 2 big hitters with us. Of course, it's Pat Fitzmaurice, and Billy Muzio is back. We are talking all of the ranks, running backs, wide receivers, and more. Let's get it right because there are lots of questions. Pat, we were surprised by the number 1 running back not being active last week. We're going to be surprised in talking about a few more running backs that might be inactive this week as well. Are you ready for the chaos?
I'm ready for the chaos. A lot of adjustments to make, of course, and especially Welsh when there were only, I think, an average of 185 passing yards per team in week 1. So a lot of people really disappointed with some various pass catchers in week 1. I know I had heavily drafted Chris Olave, Terry McLaurin, Drake London. A lot of guys who were just no-shows in week 1. Maybe they'll bounce back in week 2. But
yeah, 100%. Offense is down, hat size is up. Billy Muzio with the big dog here, ready to show the big head for all the big takes on the ranks. Billy, what's up, buddy?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk week 1 and week 2 football. It is nothing like already pivoting in week 2 after the injuries start amassing. It wouldn't be fantasy football without it.
100%. And we are doing that. So we are going to be going through all the ranks. We've got running back, wide receiver, the big core positions, quarterback, tight end. We're going to be giving you what the ECR looks like. And then we're going to be talking about some of the biggest differences we have. If you guys want to check out those ranks, go to fantasypros.com/rankings. All throughout the week, as we continue to lock those ranks, there's going to be a lot of adjustments. Literally, as we were recording this morning, Raheem Mostert is inactive. We're probably going to have a few more of those. So make sure you've got it bookmarked, fantasypros.com/rankings, fantasypros.com/rankings. Before we jump into it, because we want to tell you guys about your opportunity to win. If you want a chance to win a signed Devontae Smith Eagles helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you got to do is head over to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form, and either download the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. By the way, you can do all those things because the more actions you complete, the more entries you're going to receive. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. All right, gentlemen, let's jump right into this. We are going to start with our week 2 running back ranks. Here is the big board, our top 12 for the week. We've got Breece Hall coming in at number 1 against Tennessee. Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, and Kyren Williams are going to be rounding out our top 5. Isiah Pacheco at 6, Derrick Henry at 7, Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon, Devon Achane, James Cook, and Ken Walker. Those are our current top 12. The big question, though, let's start with Devon Achane. We're not going to usually sit in the top 12, but we got a few big things here. We know Raheem Mostert is officially out. We also know that Devon Achane is a game-time decision. And all the words that are being thrown out, they don't sound great. They don't really sound great. Like, we'll see, maybe. I don't feel confident about that. So there's a bigger question, which we'll just hit right here anyways with Jeff Wilson and Jaylen Wright. But first up, Pat, let's start with you. What's your confidence level in Devon Achane playing in this game? Because this is a top 12 RB, and this is going to change a little bit of the scope, obviously, of the top end of RBs. How do you think it's going to go?
I'm not that optimistic. Maybe a 30 to 40% chance he plays, it seems like. Was able to participate in a walkthrough Wednesday, but that really doesn't tell us much. So, yeah, I'm sort of expecting Mostert and Achane to be out, and Jeff Wilson and Jaylen Wright splitting up the workload this week.
What is going to be your value of Wright versus Wilson?
I'm going to have Wilson ranked higher. Like, he has been ahead of Wright in the pecking order. We saw Wright be a healthy scratch in week 1. And I do understand why a lot of people went out and grabbed Wright off waivers, because he has a higher upside than Wilson. Like, he has got that 4.38 speed and freaky athleticism. And if he hits, it could be a Yahtzee roll for fantasy managers who picked him up. Whereas Wilson is just sort of this dependable veteran. But the fact remains that Wilson has been on above Wright and the depth chart all training camp. Wright hasn't passed him yet. I think Wilson's going to get the start if Achane is out. And I think he's probably the favorite to out-snap and out-touch Wright this week. But again, I understand the home run potential of Wright and how that appeals to people.
Are either one going to be a top 24 back for you?
Probably just outside.
Okay. Billy, if Devon Achane plays, let's just play that game for a second. We know he's probably going to be limited in some capacity. Where do you think he ranks?
Yeah, I'd probably have him just outside the top 24 if he plays, because I like Pat, think it's probably unlikely that he plays, but this is not somebody they're going to want to, rush in and re-injure that ankle and have it be a multi-week injury now. If he's this close, it makes more sense to sit him and let him rest and just get right for as the season goes on. You're already down Mostert. You don't need to be down a second back in week 2. And so I have hesitation with him starting, but I do think he'd be, very limited if he is active for the game.
What is it going to look like for you for the Dolphins running backs if he is out and it's Wright and it's Wilson? Like, what would the rank value be of these guys? Are you trying to start both, just one of them, or is this an avoid?
I think for the most part, it's an avoid unless you have, unless you don't have a better option. If you have a pivot, I'd probably make that pivot, because I think, as Pat mentioned, and Pat's a sharp man, I agree with everything he said here. Jeff Wilson is ahead of him in the pecking order. He was active last week. We had Wright inactive. We have Wilson with 15% of the snaps last week. So more than likely, Wilson leads this backfield in touches and snap share. That being said, Jaylen Wright is the home run hitter. And so I think if you are desperate and you don't have a pivot, I am going to look at the matchup. And if it's a close matchup, I'm probably taking the guaranteed points with Jeff Wilson. If it's a matchup that I'm maybe trailing, by the projections by 15 or 20, I'm probably going to take the gamble. I'm going to throw a Wright in and look for that home run hit. So I think it's a very, dependent situation, and you have to look at it and make the decision accordingly.
Let's go to, again, we usually aren't going to sit in like the top 12, but we have a debate we can have here, because we have a running back that jumps in, is a middle ECR player that is a top 3 back or top 4 for Billy this week, and not a top 12 RB for Pat. And it's Joe Mixon. Billy, you've got him at 4 in your RB ranks this week. Pat is at 14. Talk to us about what's got you going with Joe Mixon at top 4, outside of his blatantly great performance last week. You obviously think this is going to carry over against the Bears.
Yeah, this was a back I was very high on going into the season. I had him inside my top 10 at the running back position. Just loved, the situation. He leaves the Bengals, which was a high-powered offense, and goes to arguably an even more high-powered offense here in Houston, with debatably a better offensive line. This offensive line had a lot of injuries last year, and if they're healthy this year, they can take a major step forward and really, provide for Joe Mixon and give him probably the best situation that he's had in his career to date for offensive line. Mixon last week was just exactly what I was anticipating. I mean, he dominated snaps, 71% of the snaps inside of this running back backfield. He saw 10% targets to, Dario Ogunbowale only saw 3%. So this is, heavily a workhorse RB situation here in Houston. This is an offense that's going to move the chains. This is an offense that's going to be in the red zone. I love Joe Mixon here on Houston, and I love the fact that he's going to be, the go-to guy and on all 3 downs in this backfield.
That hat is killing me. I feel like you're ranking to not get a concussion. Like you're in practice. You have one of those big things that they're wearing right now. It's just throwing me off. Pat, why is he not an RB1 for you at 14?
Boy, I love Billy's bullishness on this because of the immense respect that I have for Billy and his rankings. And I had Mixon fall to me in a lot of drafts where I was getting him in the 4th or 5th round. So I'm sort of overweight on Mixon and feeling pretty good about it right now. The only reason maybe I'm pumping the brakes a little, and I think I probably do have him a spot or two too low, is just that he really feasted on a bad Colts run defense in week 1. The Colts were 24th in DVOA against the run in 2023. And after 1 week in 2024, they're dead last. So I just wonder if it might look a little different against a tougher Chicago Bears run D this week. But I do think the usage outlook is still really bright for Mixon. Probably a pretty good chance he gets something close to 20 touches or more again this week.
And just a reminder, ECR 9. ECR 9 Joe Mixon is one other in this last one. And Pat, I don't know where you have him. I'm actually pretty high on this just simply because of the idea, because the Bengals were just run all over. Billy, you've got Isiah Pacheco at 3 this week. But I emphasize 3, acting like it's not like a top 12. He's 6. He's 6 in the ECR, so it's not that far off. I'm kind of with this idea that he is in the really top realm. Real quick, Pat, where do you have Pacheco this week? Are you
RB7?
Okay, so you're like right under ECR, but right about there. Billy, is this again? Some of this has a very like week 1 dominating some of the feels, but sometimes you just got to like go with what you did see in week 1. Joe Mixon, big performance. He's ranked up. The Bengals, horrifically bad run defense last week. Is that what driving Isiah Pacheco to be this high in your ranks?
Yeah, that's mostly it. The other part is just dominating the snaps. I mean, we saw him at 80% of the snap share for these running backs. Samaje Perine only saw 16%. Carson Steele only saw 8%. When you talk about rushing attempts and the percentage, Pacheco at 75% of the rushing attempts for the team here and 11% of the target share, where Perine, who is, known for his pass catching ability, only saw 7%. And this is a Bengals team who just lost to New England. And I look at this and say this is going to be a probably a heavy game script in Isiah Pacheco's favor, and of course it's the Kansas City Chiefs who are going to be putting up points and in the red zone. So I like his chances of finishing in the top 3.
All right, let's move to RB 13 to 24. These are your RB 2s for the week. Looking over at the ECR, we've got James Conner coming in at 13, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs at 15, Rachaad White, Travis Etienne, Ramondre Stevenson. Hello, J.K. Dobbins at 19, David Montgomery, Brian Robinson, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, and Jerome Ford. That is your 13 to 24. Let's talk about Josh Jacobs here for a minute. Pat had put some notes in the show sheet of talking about Love being out, and I actually really like this. This is one of those guys, I think I said it last week, a couple players every single week, especially when you rank, you look at this guy and you're just like, I want that guy to go up. And like, I got to figure out how does this guy continue to move up? I kind of view that with Josh Jacobs. You both are above consensus right now. Billy has him at RB9. Pat, you've got him at RB10. His ECR, as I mentioned, was RB15. So, Pat, let's start with you. What do you think top 10 RB? Is this simply because Love is out and they're going to have to lean on him over maybe safety, quarterback, shorter pass? Malik Willis, shorter passes are going to be his friends. So Tucker Kraft and Josh Jacobs might be good plays. But you break it down for us. Josh Jacobs is a top 10 RB this week.
Yeah, I think the question is the pros of the likelihood of enhanced volume for Josh Jacobs as the Packers no doubt attempt to hide Malik Willis in that offense as best they can versus a diminished touchdown outlook, a diminished overall offensive outlook, maybe shorter drives, fewer plays run, and the possibility that the Colts are stacking the box because they don't really have to honor Malik Willis as a passer that much. So it's kind of a tug of war there. Ultimately, I'm going to side with the volume here. And I do think like there is an excellent chance Josh Jacobs gets north of 20 carries this week in that attempt to hide Malik Willis. And again, it's against this Colts defense that was really gouged by Joe Mixon last week.
So it's an interesting concept because the Colts defense, I think, plays a really big positive in here. The one thing I would push back on, Billy, is that the first half of that game last week, it was nothing but Jordan memes for Josh Jacobs. Everyone's like, I'm an idiot. I'm the worst drafter ever. The season's over. Josh Jacobs is a disaster. And then all of a sudden, the pass game kind of kept going more. It set up the run game better. Bam. You could look at that and go, well, without Love, how are they going to set anything up? But like Pat said, also, it's a potentially bad defensive scheme that they were able to run on last week. Is that what you're going with? Are you a little bit worried we're going to get that first half Josh Jacobs, Jordan cry meme again, where there is nothing there for him?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tale of two tales, and just like Pat mentioned, there's a lot of kind of back and forth, and maybe some contradicting opinions here for why we like him. But at the same time, we saw that defense wear down over time last week. Josh Jacobs, I did a post on Twitter saying that he looked horrible. He just needed a little motivation because he started breaking out as soon as I did that tweet. But we definitely saw Philly's defense kind of start getting tired. Josh Jacobs wore him down a bit, and he started getting a little bit more room for run. To Pat's point, he's going against the Colts. He's also going to be very volume dependent here, and they are going to hide Malik Willis. I think Josh Jacobs is a guy that continues to fall into a situation where he just gets an overwhelming amount of volume and just performs with it. And so I think regardless of how bad the stat line could be and the boxes are being stacked, he's going to get enough volume to prop it up because volume is king in fantasy football. And we're looking at a potential, 24, 25%, or 24, 25 attempts more than likely this week, or I should say touches this week for him on at his backfield. So it's not something that I'm going to, take lightly, and I'm going to go ahead and bump up the rankings based upon that volume.
I'm going to be paying heavy attention to what his reception prop opens up at Josh Jacobs for this week, for sure. Little shout out to Betting Pros. Make sure to drop and watch the Betting Pros prop show later in the week. Let's talk about maybe one of the biggest discrepancies you two have. This is huge. This is an over 10 RB difference inside the top 20. James Conner. You guys are in completely different spectrums on it. Billy, you've got James Conner at 6, and Pat, you've got him at RB 17. So, Billy, why don't you first make the case on why he's a top 6 back this week, and then Pat, you can just down talk everything that Billy says.
This is another one that just breaks down to volume. It breaks down to snap share, and it just breaks down to how this team is utilizing their backfield. Everybody drafted Trey Benson thinking he was going to be heavily involved, and Benson only saw 13% of the snaps. He saw 12% of the rushing share and only saw 3% of the target share, which is where people thought he's going to be a little bit more active. James Conner dominated this backfield. He saw 67% of the snaps. He saw 64% of the rushing share, and he saw 10% of the targets. Finishes as the RB10 for the week. Arizona comes up against the Rams, and this is an inter-conference game, and I think that they're going to lean heavily on James Conner again. We just saw the kind of struggling connection between the receivers here and Kyler Murray, and I think that they're going to lean on what's working, and that seems to be James Conner at the moment.
Pat, do you disagree, or is this more of a disinterest rank? Like, yeah, he has volume. This is fine, but my interest isn't going heavy into James Conner. Why the big difference, you think, between you two?
Not really a big difference of opinion. I think Billy gets it right as far as the rosy volume outlook for James Conner. I just sort of have him towards the back end of a tier. I could easily have him more as like a low-end running back one. I do worry slightly that I think the Cardinals have said that Jonah Williams, their starting right tackle, is going to miss this game. But like that's not a reason to fade James Conner. I do think he's pretty much an unconditional start this week.
One of the big names to talk about, whether it was waivers, whether it was our buy, sell, and trade video that we just did, was J.K. Dobbins. And I'll tell you, J.K. Dobbins was one of my favorite preseason guys overall, just because, thinking he's going to get some play. He didn't exactly get the volume, but he had the production in week 1. And I think that might be part of this conversation. J.K. Dobbins comes in at 19 on this list. And Pat, you have him at 19. Billy has him at 26. So Pat, let's start with you. I'll be honest with you, in the buy, sell, and trade, I said I do think that even though I am a J.K. Dobbins guy, you might need to consider putting him out there after this huge performance. I think there were some things that are overblown. Like 75% of his yards, he was untouched. And I don't think that's going to continue. He didn't do a whole lot after contact. Explosiveness is a question on J.K. Dobbins, and we didn't get volume. But he was still awesome. And this is another really good matchup. So talk to us about why you have Dobbins inside the top 20, Pat.
Well, the Chargers offensive line did absolutely maul the Raiders front 7 last week. And I wonder if that might not be a continuing trend. Like, I thought the Chargers were in trouble with rookie tackle Joe Alt having to go up against Max Crosby. The nickname Joe Alt Delete is very apt in this case, because he did delete Max Crosby in his first game. Like, this Charger offensive line, I thought I saw that they were getting an average of almost 5 yards before contact in the running game in week 1. So, like, now they get the Panthers and their run defense, which is just abysmal. Like, this is a great matchup. And I don't think we're going to see many 70-yard breakaway runs for J.K. Dobbins this year, but he did look pretty good. I thought he looked really good on his cuts. And this is from someone who was fading J.K. Dobbins hard throughout draft season. I just am not inclined to bet on someone who's had a major knee surgery and an Achilles tear. But here we are, and he had about, a 60-40 split with Gus Edwards. And I actually think Gus Edwards is flex-worthy this week against the Panthers. This offensive line against this defense is a mismatch, and I think Dobbins should be starting for everyone this week.
And I do agree with this. I'm going to take the guess here, Billy, that your lower rank, because you have been heavily volume based, I'm going to guess volume is going to play some role in this, maybe injury as well, because he was out carried, by the way. It doesn't feel like it, but he was out carried by Gus. It was 11-10. Just JK had that really big explosive play. Is he at 26 because he's just in this timeshare?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, this is one of the guys I actually have circled on my sheet as I need to take another look at and potentially move up the rankings this week. After I do the preliminary run, I usually look at the news coming out of the week and then adjust as we get closer to the Sunday games. And I think he's one I'm going to take a closer look at. But yeah, a lot of it is volume. And we're talking about only 10 attempts on the ground, 135 yards to 13.5 yard per attempt average. That's unsustainable. 61 of those 135 yards came on one rushing play. So it's not something I want to, really kind of bank on happening again. Dobbins used to be explosive. I don't necessarily think he's that explosive still, and he's probably getting back to form, but there's a lot of questions there. So yes, to answer your question, volume, it definitely comes into play here. He did see 59% of the snaps versus Gus Edwards 41 and 38% of the rushing share versus 42. So he's going to have to make his money here, probably inside of the targets where he dominated, 12% versus 4%. But it's definitely a situation to monitor. If he starts getting more of that 45% rushing share, I'm probably a little bit more confident. But right now I have some doubts.
Yeah, and over 10 yards per carry before contact. So, I mean, it's a pretty big number. But also, I'm a massive nerd. The enjoyment I got out of Joe Alt Delete is ridiculous. I'm laughing with my teeth out. It's so stupid. RBs 25 through 26. Number 25, hello, Jordan Mason. Tony Pollard at 26. DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss, Javonte Williams at 30. Ezekiel Elliott, Zamir White, Austin Eckler, Gus Edwards in that flex spot. Tajay Spears and Chuba Hubbard, that rounds out our 36. We have got to talk about Jordan Mason, and frankly, I think it would have been justified to throw Jordan Mason into this RB1 conversation because I believe this current rank is just the hedge of if McCaffrey plays, he's still like a flex-worthy guy. It's leaning that he is not going to play. I'll tell you guys, I have him in my top 10 right now, and I'm not messing around with my ranks because I do not believe McCaffrey will play, and if McCaffrey does not play, Jordan Mason I don't think is a doubting top 12 RB. I have him inside my top 10. Billy, let's start with you. You've got him at 28. I believe Pat has him at 25. I think you guys kind of are playing that let's wait and see hedge game. But when McCaffrey does not play, where do you think Mason is going to belong?
I have him in the projection sheet right now as RB8. I don't think McCaffrey plays. And so they've already said that he's more likely out than he is in. We're, dominating touches here with Jordan Mason, 81% of the snaps, 76% of the rushing share. This is a back that just looked absolutely amazing inside the Shanahan offense. I mean, pretty much every back that can stay healthy is amazing inside the Shanahan offense. No biasness with the red and gold behind me, but that being said, I mean, this is a Minnesota defense that's probably talking about game script going to be heavily favored in San Francisco's favor, which is going to mean a lot more volume here for Jordan Mason on the ground, probably come the second half. So this is a very big volume dependent, but also scheme play for Jordan Mason, who could easily be into the top 5 again, but I have him into the top 10 as well at RB8 right now.
Oh, Pat, I didn't even realize you're sandwiched between Niner fans, so apologies, Pat. Again, you have him in those 20s. So, Pat, what is Jordan Mason when Christian McCaffrey is listed as inactive?
Yeah, so he's RB8 for me too. I was looking at that before where would I put him? It would be exactly RB8. And, we've gotten these conflicting reports. There was a report from The Athletic that if week 1 had been a playoff game, McCaffrey could have played. But what is the incentive for the 49ers to rush McCaffrey back into action when they easily handled a good Jets team in week 1 without McCaffrey? Why tempt fate and, subject him to possibly a more long-term injury in week 1? So, yeah, I think we're probably not going to see McCaffrey this week. And Mason, got to tee him up if you have him.
More reasons also I'd point out. FantasyPros.com/rankings. You've got 2 really distinctive changes that can happen in ranks in a short period of time with Devon Achane and Jordan Mason. Those guys not just can flip, but Achane can come off that list. Mason could be a top 10. So make sure you're checking it out. I'm going to affect those ranks because I'm not even messing with it. I've already got him top 10. And I think a lot of people will be following suit. A couple more in this. We're calling it the flex RB range. Billy, you have got Tony Pollard at 24. Pat, you've got him at 29. He was kind of a big discussion. He was actually a player in that buy sell that I think is a buy right now, seeing the volume of Tony Pollard. So you've got him as an RB2, Billy. Give us your Tony Pollard take.
Yeah, this is another back I was high on going into the season. I just thought that he was going to out-snap Tajay Spears. It was kind of an odd signing, honestly, just because they're both very similar, running back styles to me, but Tony Pollard a little bit better between the tackles, in my opinion, than Tajay Spears. Both can catch the ball, and we saw that kind of play out here in week 1, and I think that trend continues. So Tony Pollard saw 62% of the snaps. We saw Tajay Spears with 44% of the snaps. Rushing attempts, though, dominated by Tony Pollard, 62% versus 15%. And then here's the part that was the most interesting to me. I thought that with the former that they would lean heavier on Tajay Spears in the passing game, but both of them saw 14% of the target share. So I don't know if that was just the week 1 blues with, how poorly Will Levis played, only throwing a 3.97 yard per attempt, 59% completion percentage, and he just leaned on the running backs because he had to. But we get the Jets here in week 2. We're talking about a stout front, so this might be another running back duo tandem here in the passing game, and I like the chances of Pollard, being dominated the touches again in between the tackles. Yeah. So that's why I got Pollard there as an RB2.
Yeah, the last thing you said is like a really key one too. I believe he had 61% of his yards came after contact, and he had the third most yards in gap schemes this week. Ramondre Stevenson was number 1 between the gaps. Pollard was number 3 of all total rushing yards. So all that's telling me is like they're comfortable with him being the primary back. They don't need to bring someone else in between, whether it's going out or in, and they're throwing him the ball. But Pat, you are, I don't want to say a decent amount, but you're relatively under consensus, 3 or 4 spots under. So do you think the Pollard thing is a little bit of mirage and Tajay, it's only a matter of time before Tajay Spears? Or again, is this kind of like you're just Tony Pollard's whatever?
I don't. I mean, I think Billy is right that this is more going to be the Tony Pollard show and that these backs are not going to be used in equal measure like I thought they would before the summer. And now I'm kind of regretting that I have avoided Tony Pollard like the plague throughout draft season. But I do find it sort of interesting that Brian Callahan seemed almost rueful in his post-game presser that he did not use Tajay Spears more. I mean, it's coach speak, and maybe he's just trying to keep Spears' spirits up about not being used as much as Pollard. But like, I also do have some concerns about the matchup. Granted, the Jets did not look good against Jordan Mason and Deebo Samuel in the running game on Monday night. But I do think this is, if not, a great run defense, an above average one. Like, certainly the Jets are better against the pass than they are against the run defensively. But like, I don't think they're going to be the pushover they were in San Francisco in week 1.
Another one here before we just get our favorite outside the top 36 is Javonte Williams. Pat, you've got Javonte Williams at 28 inside, like firm flex option. Billy has him outside of a flex. I kind of lean on Billy's side here because Jaleel McLaughlin had a really good share as far as the receiving and the running games goes. Javonte Williams looked good early on, but I just don't feel confident in overall workload. But Pat, what say you? What say you on Javonte Williams and what gets him inside the top 30 of RBs this week?
Well, Javonte did outsnap Jaleel McLaughlin 36-24. So he had 50% more snaps, only 8 carries for 23 rushing yards for Javonte. And it was sort of a problem that Seattle just seemed to be not worried about Bo Nix going downfield and just sort of swarming the Broncos running backs. And we know these Denver running backs are going to be used heavily in the passing game. They led the NFL in running back targets last year with 153. I think it could be a pass catching bonanza this year for Javonte and McLaughlin. But the problem was they were getting swarmed as soon as they caught the ball. Like I think they combined for 6 receptions last week, but those receptions produced under 5 yards. So, that might be a problem with opposing defenses just not honoring the deep pass at all, stacking the box. But still, I think the volume is appealing here. Javonte is the lead back. Like, he played ahead of Jaleel McLaughlin, and I think both guys are going to be involved as pass catchers. So I'm kind of sticking to my original read on Javonte and not letting the one troublesome result dissuade me from playing him.
And that is, I would point out, I think most people know this, but we need like probably a good 3 weeks to have like a true comfortable feel of what's going on, because we are reacting a lot to week 1. And this is a pretty good prime example. Everyone was like, hey, we're back on Javonte Williams. Look how good he looks in the preseason. Game 1, we're like, oh, no, it doesn't. Jaleel McLaughlin, 10 carries. He's the receiving back. I kind of feel that way, but there is a lot more to see. Not to steal a little bit of the thunder, Billy, but not only are you outside the top 36 on Javonte Williams, your back that you chose for your favorite outside the top 36 is Jaleel McLaughlin, and you have them about swapped here. You've got McLaughlin higher than Javonte Williams this week, so let's hear it.
It's a bold stance, Cotton. We'll see how that turns out. But we got the biggest thing is just Jaleel McLaughlin dominated the targets over Javonte Williams. 5-1, 13% target share versus 5% target share. This is an offense that I think is going to struggle throughout the course of the season. And if that's the trend, I think that Jaleel McLaughlin is going to continue to see double-digit targets, which is why he's going to be kind of swapped with Javonte. Not to mention, as you guys said earlier, Jaleel McLaughlin saw 10 attempts, and we had Javonte Williams with 8 attempts. So it looks like they shifted gears here with Jaleel versus Javonte as the game script changed. And they were kind of forced into like almost a 2-minute drill from the get-go. And Jaleel McLaughlin continues to just kind of dominate that scenario, in my opinion. And I think that we're going to see that throughout the course of the season. And we also saw kind of in the preseason, there was a lot of Javonte hype, but when it gets down to Sean Payton and him kind of leaning on a back, we've seen this throughout his career. He kind of picks a back, leans into him, and kind of always overutilizes him. And he continued to talk up Jaleel McLaughlin over the course of the summer, talking about his work ethic and being the first to practice, the last to leave practice. Whenever I see Sean Payton talk about running back, I usually tend to listen. And if that trend continues based upon his coaching history and now his usage, I like to see Jaleel McLaughlin into the top 30.
Also, speaking of bold, Pat, as we finish out here, the outside the top 36 back, I feel like you're going bold because team hates him. They hate all their running backs, and maybe they're just going to readjust. You're going with Chuba Hubbard as your back. They put Miles Sanders in that game a whole bunch. So talk to us about why Chuba is going to bounce back in week 2.
Chuba still outsnapped Sanders 32-22 in that game, and I think we kind of have to throw that week 1 result out the window. Like the Panthers got Chuba Hubbard got Joe Alt deleted from the game plan when that game script went south, when the Saints completely ambushed the Panthers out of the gate. And there probably are going to be more bad Panthers losses on the way, but they're not going to get stomped like that every week. So I think Hubbard is still a viable play, kind of a flex play, at least until Jonathan Brooks is ready to come back and contribute.
All right, we're going to talk about our wide receiver ranks, but first, TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score that touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Last week, we had multiple touchdown calls here. I did a short video where we had almost even money on Ken Walker and Justin Jefferson plus 125, both cash. Maybe this week, go take a look at what a Jeff Wilson touchdown might look like. If you're ready to score a touchdown and do a touchdown dance of your own, new DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, and you can get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, gentlemen, let's take a look at the top 12 wide receivers for week 2. We go to Tyreek Hill as number 1, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, hello Cooper Kupp at 4, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice. That's your top 10, followed by Nico Collins and Deebo Samuel. Let's kick it off talking. We'll go to Billy here as a 49er fan. I think this is appropriate. Deebo's ECR is 12. Both of you guys are ahead on ECR for Deebo Samuel. Billy, you've got him at 8. Pat has him at 9. I will tell you, Andrew Erickson was throwing some shade on maybe this might be trade time for Deebo, but one thing we do know for this week, he's going to get volume again. The only thing is it wasn't this magnificent volume he had against the Jets. They really couldn't figure out those little like slant routes that they like to do with Deebo. We didn't really see any screen passes for him to get open. They did a lot of stuff out of the backfield. He just didn't have any of those big Deebo breakout plays. But regardless of the point, was you saw the volume, over 10 touches. You saw him get that score. And I think that's a lot what drives this. Billy, I'm going to guess you're going to echo some of those sentiments. Do you think this can be a bigger level of what we saw with the Jets with the Minnesota Vikings this week?
That's accurate. Yeah, Jets a much better defense in my opinion, but it's going to break down to also just the projection of Christian McCaffrey sitting. And when we've seen him sit, Deebo Samuel has kind of been the apple of the eye of the offense. I mean, are we talking back to 2023 in week 3 when they played the Giants? He had 12 targets. This week he just had 9 targets. He'd only converted on 5, but he seems to be the focal point of the offense whenever Christian McCaffrey sits, and I think that trend continues. Last week we saw him with 32% of the target share. I don't expect that again. I'm looking at more like 22% as we get Brandon Ayuk up to speed after missing, most of training camp. And I do think, like I said earlier, that Mason's going to be heavily involved as well, but I think Deebo Samuel's as good of a bet as anyone to finish into the top 10. Yeah,
Pat, you have him in the same general range. I think maybe the only other question to throw in is like Ayuk getting more of a share this week. You also, if as a 49er fan, one thing you have to acknowledge, and people don't, and it's why low 20-yard totals show up for like a guy like Jawan Jennings. Like Jawan Jennings is going to have a little bit in this offense. We saw it last week. But can Ayuk's, in the team with the offense being 1 week more take away from Deebo at all, or is that rushing side just still too much for you? I mean, you have him at top 9, so I'm going to guess that's like the direction. But just throwing out, like, are you a little bit worried about Ayuk's target share maybe taking away from Deebo?
Not yet. One of my favorite unders last week in the player prop market was the under on Brandon Ayuk receiving yardage. I'm probably going to hit that one more week before I get off that train, because I like Ayuk didn't have a training camp, basically. So I think the ramp up is still going on. But otherwise, Billy nailed this with the enhanced Deebo usage with, no Christian McCaffrey. We're going to see him involved in the running game. We're going to see him involved in the short passing game. Maybe Kittle's more involved this week because Kittle was doing a lot of blocking against a good Jets defense last week. Maybe Kittle gets more involved in route running in week 2. But I still think there is 10 target upside, as Billy mentioned with Deebo.
Again, we're sticking in the top 12 here just for some of the big differences. I really like this one. I'm actually the middle ground between you two. Billy, you've got Rashee Rice as wide receiver 6 this week. Pat, you have him at 12. I have him at 9 on this list, and he comes in at 10. So we're kind of like all over the board. Billy, you're the high guy on Rashee Rice. But Pat, let's kick it to you here for a second. I thought the usage of what we saw with Rashee Rice and Patrick Mahomes looks like something they're going to exploit every single quarter of every single game. I have a hard time imagining we are not going to see the 8+ target Rashee Rice almost every single week. I kind of think he's a relative lock to be a top 8 wide receiver week in and week out. What's taking you off of him being inside the top 10 at 12?
Yeah, and mea culpa. Like, I was worried about his volume ticking down this year because of the additions of Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. They just didn't have any downfield receiving threats last year. Now they've got 2 really good ones. But, I mean, Patrick Mahomes destroyed the Ravens with slants to Rashee Rice in week 1. And if that is working, they're probably going to keep going to that. So yeah, he's still a wide receiver 1 for me this week, even if I'm not quite as high on him as Billy is. But right now, if Hollywood Brown doesn't play, I'll probably creep up Rashee Rice in my rankings a bit.
And Billy, you got him at 6. Do you think what we saw last week is just going to be an absolute repeat for this?
Yeah, I think so. As long as Hollywood is out, I think that's kind of the disclaimer here, because once Hollywood's back in, I think we see this offense maybe shift and change slightly. We have to look at, the new weapons and what they bring to the team and how this offense is going to change on a week-to-week basis, depending upon who's in and out. But I think if we have a repeat of last week and Brown sits, then I think that Rashee Rice is going to continue to be utilized in the same fashion. I mean, he dominated touches, 33% of the targets, 30% of the air yards as well, despite having only a 5.3 ADOT. So this is a guy that I think they're just going to lean into and continue to utilize, especially when we have, other weapons out.
I'll say, I think I'm more optimistic than either one of you guys. Like, I don't care about Hollywood Brown coming out because I don't think Hollywood Brown affects the role of what we saw Rashee Rice doing. And Rashee Rice was just easy slant in, safety net type of stuff. Mahomes loves safety net guys. If anything, I think Hollywood Brown might kind of be in that Xavier Worthy type of space of like that big play, get the open field stuff. If Mahomes doesn't get it, he checks down back to Rashee Rice. So I think I actually exude a little bit more confidence. But again, we're talking about like the top end guys here. One last one. This is another one of those big rank ones. And I think this is relevant to talk about because it's a three-headed monster in Houston of those wide receivers. What we do know is Nico Collins is the dude. He is the dude there. So I don't think there's ever going to be a question about like startability, but you guys have got a difference here on Nico Collins where Nico is 11 on the board. And Pat, you have him at 17 though. What's got you? Is it the three-headed monster that's got you a little bit shading on Nico Collins? And it's a defensive matchup that's a little bit tougher.
Yeah, Jaylen Johnson, Nico could see some of him, which would be a deterrent. I mean, Jaylen is one of the best cover men in the game. But yeah, it is the three-headed monster Welsh. And they made it work, to their credit, in week 1. 32 pass attempts. Every one of the 3 wide receivers for Houston got at least 6 targets, and Nico had 8. So a 25% target share. We like that a lot. It's just not going to happen that way every week. So he's a start for sure, but I'm just sort of playing the potential downside if it happens to be more of a Diggs-Dell week.
Okay, and Billy has him at ECR, so we'll be good and confident with that. But I'm going to start with Billy on this next one because let's go to wide receiver 13 to 24. This is a big critical area. Jaylen Waddle at 13. Brandon Ayuk is at 14 this week. Malik Nabers, Marvin Harrison, back-to-back 15, 16. That actually swapped, by the way. It was Harrison about 2 days ago over Nabers, and that has flipped. Michael Pittman at 17. London, Devontae Smith, Olave, DJ Moore, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin, and Zay Flowers. Marvin Harrison has been one of the most talked about players this week, really in a we got to go and buy him. But there's also some concerns. His separation numbers looked bad, really slow out the gate too. They were talking about his top speed was not what you would have expected out of this guy. And both of you are dinging him this week in the ranks. Probably a lot to do with that, especially with also the target share. ECR 15, people expecting a bounce back. You guys are not. Billy, you have him at 23. Pat's even worse at 25. How worried should we be about Marvin Harrison moving forward compared to even this week? Because you guys do pretty much have him as wide receiver 2s. So, Billy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, this was the guy I kind of cautioned, drafters at the beginning of the season to just dive into the data because we saw Puka Nacua, who broke almost every single rookie record, who finished inside the top 7th position, and people were drafting Marvin Harrison at either wide receiver 8 or 9. And so the repeat in history was unlikely. However, the fall from grace as far as he fell in week 1 was also unexpected. So I do think it's going to take him a little bit of time to adjust maybe to the NFL speed. Week 1 jitters could be part of it as well. The team just kind of getting the chemistry down. So I did knock him because of that, especially in the target share department, only seeing 10%. So I expect it to get better. It can't get much worse, but I do think that we are going to see maybe a slower start than maybe most anticipated or wanted out of Marvin Harrison, and it kind of get our expectations kind of back to reality here with the rookie wide receiver.
Pat, you're the low ranker on Marvin Harrison. I think it's fair to say like it's not hard to be better than he was last week, and that's going to improve. But were you worried? Because I know you've probably seen. Are you worried about some of those separation numbers, that top speed, and what that's equating to? If people are wondering, people are questioning his athleticism at this point because of how bad some of that stuff looked. Do you think those are questions we really should have, or is this simply like, oh, we just maybe overrated this dude, and he needs to be lower, and that's that?
I'm not worried long term. I saw too much of him at Ohio State and was pretty overwhelmingly impressed by what I saw throughout his college career. So I'm not worried for the season, but I do want a show me game before I move him back into the top 20 in my ranks. And for most people, like I know in the leagues where I have Marvin Harrison Jr., like benching him is not really an option. Like I don't have better wide receivers who I could stick in there, but maybe in a 10-team league, you might have 4 or 5 good receivers and can afford to leave one out. And I could understand leaving Marv outside the starting lineup until he gives you that game that shows, yeah, he can be an impactful NFL player. But I think we're going to get it soon.
Let's talk about the other rookie wide receiver, Malik Nabers, who we definitely saw targets, but unfortunately he has one major flaw. Daniel Jones is his quarterback, and there's nothing he can do about that right now. Pat, you have him at 14. Billy, it looks like you're giving him the Daniel Jones ding at 21. I'm going to assume that's what that is. But Pat, let's talk about you, because to me, 14 says even Daniel Jones can't hold this guy down. So are you not worried about this quarterback affecting him outside of the top 15? Because I mean, I think like it's not a talent thing with Malik Nabers. It's just really bad play around him. I kind of think you could make these same arguments of dinging him like you do Marvin Harrison to Malik Nabers, except obviously it's just about the quarterback play. I just think it lives in the same realm. You're not ranking it like that, though.
I'm not going to say I'm unconcerned about the quarterback situation, Welsh, but Washington has the worst set of cornerbacks in the National Football League, and they do not have anyone who can hang with Malik Nabers. I also don't think Malik Nabers is going to be out-targeted by Wan'Dale Robinson 12-7 again. Like, I think Malik gets more than 7 targets this week, and I think he feasts on this really bad pass defense.
Billy, is this rank like a Daniel Jones rank?
No, it's more of a tier rank. This is a really tight tier for me. I mean, we're talking about, just a handful of fantasy points separating, 16 to this spot. So I think that this is a tier that you could almost interchange a lot of these wide receivers. And Nabers could more than likely, jump to the top of this tier for me by, come Sunday as the finalized rankings come out. So I don't want to ding him. We did see, heavy usage from Wan'Dale Robinson at 31% of the target share. Unsustainable here. We're probably talking about Nabers closer to 27% versus the 19% that he saw. So I do like a bounce back week. I'm probably a little slightly low on Nabers here in the original projection sheet, but I think there's an argument to be made both ways.
This is a really interesting one because Chris Olave was shut out last week, and when that offense was just absolutely humming. Well, Pat, you aren't really going to hold him against that, but Billy, you sure seem to be. Billy, you've got him at 31 at wide receiver this week, where Pat has him at 16. Again, this is another one of those big differences. This is a tier difference. If we're looking at 12 wide receivers as a tier, this is way outside of the tier. So, Billy, let's just jump to you. What's got you so negative on Chris Olave?
The target share was a little concerning, 9%. The routes, he was on the field 88%, so that was promising. But usually when we see, wide receivers that are supposed to be elite, we're talking about 94, 95+% in the route category. So I have, some slight concerns there with the overall, usage and being on the field. And it just breaks down to, again, a tight knit tier. And I think that it's one of the guys I do have circled that I'm probably low on this week and is going to adjust. I definitely have concerns, but I think it's probably warrants me looking at the sheet a second time and making some adjustments. So more than likely he'll move up, but I do have some original concerns.
Pat, we're going to jump over to this one here, not to not let you talk about Olave, but you've got him in that high range. I want to talk about the Bears situation because you guys are really interesting on this Bears side. ECR DJ Moore is at 22. Pat, you've got DJ Moore at 13, Billy at 14, but also Keenan Allen. ECR is at 29, Billy's at 19, and you are at 24. So you guys are both higher than consensus on both of these Bears wide receivers. Rome Odunze being out probably is going to help this a little bit as well. But Pat, what's your take on really specifically DJ Moore? Because you are dramatically higher than ECR right now, but both Keenan and DJ Moore seem to be your guys this week.
Yeah, I think the reservations that any fantasy managers might have had with the Bears wide receivers during draft season was that it was going to be a 3-way split with the targets coming from a rookie quarterback. And now it's a 2-way split, at least in the near term, with Rome Odunze likely to miss at least a couple of weeks here. And with only two guys, with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen as being the main targets in that offense, I feel better about it. And I don't think we're going to have all that many more games where Caleb Williams throws for under 100 yards. There might be some red zone struggles and some struggles generally, but I don't want to over punish Caleb Williams for that that shaky first week. And DJ Moore and Keenan Allen should both get plenty of targets. I would think they both get at least 7 or 8 this week. I think they're both must starts.
Billy, obviously the same question. I kind of agree. Like, I don't want to ding Caleb Williams long term. I'm not really sure I'm willing to like give him the pass after week 1, because that was a bad game. And you're going to go into like this big, I'm not that Houston's a good defense, but you're going to go into this like power offense, and they're going to have to make some big plays. One of their guys is off the table. I guess I'm just a little bit more reserved in jumping way back into both of these guys after watching Caleb's play. Are you not?
The play was, horrendous to say the least. I mean, 48% completion percentage, 3.21 yard per attempt. It wasn't pretty. Week 1 jitter is probably part of it, but to Pat's point, this is a consolidated tree. I mean, we already saw Keenan Allen last week at 33% of the targets and DJ Moore at 29. This is a quarterback that we're probably going to see him hyper focus his 2 targets now, and use his running backs and his tight end as an outlet and probably the third options or fourth even at time, depending upon the position. And so I think Keenan Allen and DJ Moore are pretty locked into seeing, the bulk of the opportunities here in the passing game, especially as Caleb Williams adjusts to the NFL speed and relies heavily on his 1 and 2 receivers. So it's a volume play. DJ Moore, 94% of the routes, Keenan Allen at 79%. Dunze was on the field actually more at 85%. And now Keenan Allen steps into that role, probably seeing 90+% of the route. So both these guys are going to be on the field a lot, and they're going to be heavily utilized.
Let's go take a look at wide receivers 25 through 36. This is your wide receiver 3 of the week. DK Metcalf at 25, Stephon Diggs at 26, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Xavier Worthy coming in at 30, George Pickens, Tank Dell, Jamison Williams, Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, and Jayden Reed. ECR and Fitz both have George Pickens at 30. Billy, 16. George Pickens, almost wide receiver 1. Lay it on us, man.
This one breaks down to usage. I'm a big usage guy, and probably the trend is showing here during the podcast. But I mean, this is 32% of the team's target share. We saw a combined receivers of the rest of the receiving core here between Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller combined for 18%. So it's pretty clear that George Pickens is the number 1 if you had any doubts. Outside of that, they're looking at the tight end position and the running back position. But we have seen this with Justin Fields in the past. I mean, he just locks onto 1 receivers and just forces the ball whenever he is not running it. And so Pickens is going to be that guy. So I think that we saw last week, he was heavily targeted. He didn't get the touchdown. He still saw 85 yards, but that touchdown, that changes it. I think we see this ranking probably flopped across ECR, and he's probably into the top 20 across the board. So this is anytime we have this type of volume in a receiver standpoint, it's hard to rank him outside the top 20, in my opinion, and especially if that touchdown hits.
I mean, Pat, I guess my trepidation of this is like Arthur Smith, Justin Fields. Like, I don't know if Pickens is the guy in that offense behind Justin Fields and that coordinator that is going to pull that off. I mean, you don't rank him that way, so I'm not trying to lead you to bash him or be really high on it. But like, do you think this is respectfully like a wild rank of like inside the top 50 or 15?
Yeah, I mean, Billy is one of the very sharpest rankers in the business, so I always have moments of terror whenever I see that we're really split on a player like this or like Chris Olave. But I think I have some of the same concerns that you do. I mean, there's certainly boom potential with George Pickens. Billy pointed out the target share is probably going to be really good. He has elite ball skills. He can make his day on basically 1 or 2 catches. My concerns are, I think he played a snap share of under 70% in week 1, which is more to the weirdness of the Arthur Smith offense. The possibility of a run heavy approach with Justin Fields at quarterback and Arthur Smith generally operating his offenses that way. and the potential for a lot of FaceTime with Patrick Surtain, one of the better cover men in the game. So there are more reasons for me to lean towards bust here than boom, I guess.
Xavier Worthy is a big question, and this is going to be, I think now this is the single biggest rank difference. Xavier Worthy is with ECR with Fitz at 31. I'm going to save Billy's rank here for a second, and we'll lead it up to it. But Pat, talk to us about why you're comfortable with Xavier Worthy this week.
Another guy with a wide range of outcomes, and we only saw him with 4 touches in week 1, but man, that speed. This is a dude who can get it done for fantasy teams on just a handful of touches because Xavier Worthy is a big play waiting to happen. Billy,
you hate him. You think he shouldn't be in the end? No, I'm just kidding. You've met 52 after that game. 52, Billy. What's up with Xavier Worthy? Is this Hollywood Brown based? Is this there's only so many targets around? He looked pretty good.
Oh, he actually looked great, and it's definitely a guy that I think I'm low on this week that is going to be adjusted. But that being said, you can't rely on that touchdown rate. I mean, we're talking about 2 touchdowns on the limited capacity that he had, limited opportunities. That's not gonna stay. I do think that he's going to be extremely explosive, but this is a guy that's probably going to be very tantalizing for fantasy players. He's going to have weeks like he did last week, and then he's going to have weeks where he has, 4, maybe 5 targets and no touchdowns and probably like 27 yards. And so I think we're going to see the boom bust out of Xavier Worthy, and I'm kind of just drawing a line in the sand right now. That sand might be a little too far to the wide receiver 50 mark than it should, but and more than likely comes down a little bit, but it's definitely a guy that I have concerns about despite his explosive performance in week 1.
One other one that's a really fun one here, and I think the quarterback play kind of plays into it, and ECR shows it as well. You guys both have made the commitment to Jameson Williams over Jayden Reed, and maybe this is going to be more about a Jayden Reed concern with the quarterback play. Billy has Jameson Williams at 34. Pat, you've got him at 38. Jayden Reed is ECR 36, where Pat has him at 39 and Billy has him at 50. So, Pat, how much of a safer bet is Jameson Williams over Jayden Reed this week with that quarterback play? Because I will, as much as I love Jameson Williams guy earlier this year, I actually think Jayden Reed is the one Green Bay wide receiver I really like because he is their Deebo Samuel. They're going to use him. They're in a really tough situation with Malik Willis. But what are you going to do? Screen passes and short passes to let your playmakers make plays. Who is the guy on that team that is the best playmaker? It's Jayden Reed. And that's why I actually think he is the safer option of the Green Bay guys. But what say you, Jameson over Jayden, Pat?
Well said, Welsh. I mean, I think Jayden Reed is the only Packer receiver I would want to consider starting this week. I think Watson and Dobbs are pretty much both off the table, but I'm pinning my hope on manufactured touches with Jayden Reed, and that kind of keeps his floor high. I do have Jameson Williams ranked 2 spots higher, although he had about a 30% target share. 9 of the 28 targets went to Jameson Williams. Only 6 last week for Amon-Ra St. Brown and only 5 for Sam Laporta. Week 1, a really good result and an encouraging sign for Jameson Williams overall, but I don't think we can count on a steady diet of 9 target games for him. So he's a real dicey play, but so far so good.
Billy, I want to ask this. Jayden Reed at 50, is that your highest Green Bay Packer wide receiver ranked?
It is my highest Packer receiver ranked.
So,
yeah, it just breaks down to Malik Willis. I just have no faith in the situation with him. I've seen him throw the ball in the NFL, and it makes me wonder why he's still in the NFL. And I have a lot of concerns. I think that this is a tight end and running back game. I think all the receivers are going to struggle, but I do think Jayden Reed is going to be the number 1 receiver on the team for the week, despite the lackluster enthusiasm for Malik Willis.
Final wide receiver we're going to talk about. Hey, guys, it's week 2. We've had a ton of RBs, ton of wide receivers. There's a lot to talk about and break down with it. This is officially Pat versus Billy for week 2. This is the battle. Lad McConkey. You know how I've been setting up? I'm like, oh, this one's kind of big. This one's kind of big. 20 plus spots. 22 spot difference. ECR is 38. So just outside of wide receiver 3, essentially a flex, is the ECR. Pat almost doesn't have him as a flex at 46. Billy, you have him at wide receiver 2 this week. You make your case, Billy, for Ladd McConkey.
You said I have him at number 2?
24. I'm sorry. If I said 2, I meant 24. Yeah, that would actually be really
bullish.
great.
I don't think I'm that bullish.
Yeah. Wide receiver 2 is what I meant. You have him as a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, this is target share, and also just kind of the lack of trust of Quentin Johnson. I think Quentin Johnson surpassed my expectations in week 1, but McConkey 28% of the target share. It was, as a rookie, 76% of the routes. I think that's going to only increase from there. And I think, air yards 24%. This is a guy it's going to be heavily utilized. I expected him to kind of have a slower start, and he capitalized on the opportunity in week 1. I think if that's the slowness, then I think we're going to see it continue to get more and more and more involved. And so this is a guy that I think is going to only continue to see more and more routes. So I like Ladd McConkey, and I like his involvement in the offense.
Pat, you've definitely said some of these ranks get you nervous when Billy has it there, but you guys are worlds apart on this. So what's your case on Ladd? You are under consensus. So what is your take on Ladd for this week?
What is my case? Yeah, another instance where I'm worried about going to court against Billy Muzio, Esquire, and I might just have to accept a plea deal here, because I do think I probably have to revise this ranking upward a little bit. Really encouraging target share for Ladd. I think in the initial pass and rankings, what concerned me is the possibility that this could be an ultra heavy run heavy script for the Chargers against this Panthers defense that has all sorts of trouble against the run. That's probably going to be a very positive run friendly game script for the Chargers, with Greg Roman calling the plays. So I don't know what the target outlook is going to be like for Ladd, but I think I'm probably too low with having him as kind of a low-end wide receiver 4.
McConkey was the case that they gave me. That's the line that I had to throw there. Anybody? Snoop? All right. We're going to do tight end and quarterback ranks coming up here in just a second. But first, want to tell you guys about my friends over at Game Time. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time has all-in pricing. It is literally my favorite feature. You don't have to worry about the prices that you're seeing, because you toggle this feature and it shows the total upfront. No surprise fees at checkout. Seat views, you can get panoramic views from your seat in the app before you buy, and you get the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. We had a Fantasy Pros meetup out here in Arizona. We went to a baseball game. You better believe we used Game Time, and we had awesome second row seats, and they were able to share it and get us all excited. We were checking it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS, FANTASYPROS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, quarterback ranks. This is going to be a little bit less of a conversation, as we're only talking about QBs 1 through 12. This week, it looks like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. That's your top 3. Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud dropping down to 8. Jared Goff, Tua, Dak Prescott, and Brock Purdy. That is your top 12. The interesting stuff probably is going to come outside of the top 12. And this is a difference for me. Pat, you have Joe Burrow at 15. His ECR is 14. I've actually got him at 10 this week, and I'd be curious to get Billy's take on this as well. The reason behind it is I think the Bengals are playing from behind the entire game. I think they are going to have to be slinging the ball. You're going to see more Chase Brown involved. It'd be great if we had T. Higgins, unexpected. Jamar Chase, I think, is going to play a much bigger role. I think Joe Burrow is going to be throwing almost the entirety of this game. So I actually have him from a garbage time standpoint ranked higher. You don't, Pat. So talk to me about your concerns with Joe Burrow, who was being drafted as like the 7th quarterback, and he is like 15 for you.
On one hand, yes, the high probability of a shootout game script. On the other hand, Steve Spagnuolo knows what he's doing. And the Chiefs probably have as much defensive talent on that side of the ball as they have had during the Andy Reid era. So it's not an easy matchup. We don't know what T. Higgins' status is. And I'm a little nervous about seeing video of like Joe Burrow constantly trying to loosen up his wrist throughout the game. Like that's making me a little nervous. I'm not going to lie.
Billy, you are echoing Pat's sentiment on Joe Burrow at 15. Do you think this is one of the weird ones. If you look at quarterbacks that people were taking inside the top 10, there's not another quarterback that was going inside the top 10 that's outside of a QB1 this week. And you do worry that there's a little bit of a trend. This could be moving forward and making Joe Burrow's value kind of drop a tiny bit. But I guess I would throw this at you. A lot of people like Baker Mayfield. Like, do you think this is one of those instances where, like, if you had Baker Mayfield on the bench, you would throw a Baker? This might be a bad example, Billy, because you might not have Baker very high, but where you would throw a guy like a Baker Mayfield in over Joe Burrow because you just don't think the weapons are there for him?
I have Baker at 13, so I'm starting Baker over Burrow this week. I think Pat just took the words out of my mouth. It just breaks down to him. That wrist doesn't look quite right. Also, the weapons aren't there right now. Chase is getting kind of back into the mix. And it's probably going to see, a lot more usage this week, but still, I mean, this is a guy that you can double now and force him to throw to a bunch of other ancillary pieces that aren't going to make a splash quite like Chase or Higgins would. And so I have a lot of concerns with him. I do think that the game script is in favor of the passing game, but I have a lot of concerns in regards to what that looks like and if they can convert on him. Another
quarterback you guys are more comfortable starting over Joe Burrow this week is Justin Fields. He has an ECR of 16 right now. You guys both have him higher. Pat's got him at 14. Billy, you have him at 12. So you have him as a top 12 starting quarterback. Probably much to do about the legs. Also probably to do with your George Pickens ranking in there. Anything you want to add on Justin Fields? Because essentially he's a must play for you this week.
14.
Yeah, it breaks down to the rushing. If 14 rushing attempts, 57 yards. Didn't get the touchdown, but this is a guy that can score on the ground really easily, and it's just going to prop the fantasy scores up. So, not a lot of faith in the passing game outside of the one receiver to George Pickens, and 17 completions last week, 23 attempts. So I think that the legs are going to have to get it done.
Pat, would you really feel comfortable dragging in your Justin Fields over Joe Burrow? Your rank says it. I don't know. There's like this little bit of like eeriness. I'm like, ugh. Like, I don't know how comfortable I would feel dragging Justin Fields in over Burrow, but your rank dictates you would.
Generally, I would feel better about Joe Burrow's floor. I don't know if I do with his not feeling 100% comfortable with his wrist being completely healthy. So it's definitely boom or bust with Justin Fields, but the rushing ability always gives him boom potential, and 14 carries in week one, like that's pretty promising, even though it didn't really pay off in week one.
I want to get your guys' favorite quarterback outside the top 12, and it may be a name we just talked about. Only thing I want to ask when I look at these ranks, I do feel like CJ Stroud is being dinged a little bit, and that probably has to do with the Bears offense. He just looks so phenomenal. I'll be honest with you guys, I have a hard time envisioning how I'm not going to have CJ Stroud as a top at least 6 quarterback every single week, regardless of the matchup, due to those weapons and what they can establish on the run game. Pat, do you think that CJ Stroud is a little misranked this week, or do you think we should be cautious due to that Bears defense?
Yeah, I'm starting him pretty much no matter what. If I drafted him, I'm playing him. No reservations. Top 10 for me.
Yeah, and I guess it wasn't really about like not starting him, just like it feels, I suppose if you had Jayden Daniels and CJ Stroud, if you pulled off that mix, this week's ECR is telling you a different story. Jayden Daniels is ranked higher on that because I don't want to make it some dumb question like, we're not going to start CJ Stroud. Like, you're going to start him, but it feels misranked. Billy, is there any concern whatsoever with Stroud against that Bears defense? I mean, again, this is a must-start quarterback, of course.
No, I think it's just a matter of the top quarterbacks all have a rushing floor or they're Patrick Mahomes. So just kind of where he falls in the pecking order.
All right, favorite quarterback outside the top 12. Pat, let's start with you. Who's your favorite outside top 12 quarterback that you would be trying to get in lineups this week?
It's Fields.
Justin Fields. Billy.
I'm going to just be a little different here. I would have said Fields, but I'm going to say Tua as well. I mean, this is a high over-under in the game. Tua's, got some of the best receivers in the game. And you look at what he did last week. He finished as the quarterback 9, just outside the top 12 for me this week. But I do think that he has every opportunity to finish inside.
I think the only quarterback over 300 yards last week. Or no, Stafford did it too, right? It was Stafford and Tua.
Yeah, 338 is what Tua had last week.
Ridiculous. All right, let's go look at the tight end ranks as we finish this off. Again, lots of chalk play. Sam Laporta at number 1. We've got Trey McBride at 2, Kelsey, Kittle, Kincaid. Kyle Pitts comes in at 6, Mark Andrews at 7, Evan Ingram. Hello, Isaiah Likely. Gotta love it. I'm so excited to see all the waiver wire bids and fab numbers on Isaiah Likely. That's going to be the best. Brock Bowers at 10, Dallas Goedert at 11, and Dalton Schultz at 12. So let's talk about Isaiah Likely. ECR, he is tight end 9. But Pat, you and I are in the almost exact same range. I think it's the exact same number. ECR has Mark Andrews at 7. You have him at 5, and Mark Andrews, as do I, and you have Isaiah Likely at 10, as do I. Talk to us about Likely and Andrews both being starting tight ends for week 2.
I want to beg people not to bench Mark Andrews. He played more snaps than Isaiah Likely. He took more than 3/4 of his snaps either on the outside or in the slot. Like, that is the usage we want. The targets just weren't there. He got 2 targets, and there were some plays where it looked like the Chiefs were bracketing him and giving him some heavy defensive attention. So it is not going to be like, do not panic bench Mark Andrews this week. I'm begging you. Like, I have one team where I'm fortunate enough to have Mark Andrews and Brock Bowers backing him up. I'm still starting Andrews over Bowers, and I love Bowers. I absolutely adore Bowers. So, but like, Likely could still have a role, like a prominent role in this offense. The Ravens are thin at wide receiver. Like, I don't want to diminish what Isaiah Likely did. I mean, he plays more like a wide receiver than a tight end anyway. He's just a good pass catcher. He's good at getting open. 2 of their last 3 plays, they went to him when they needed the touchdown to try to prolong the game, to tie it up. So, yeah, I mean, I think you can be high on both. It's not going to be an either or.
Has there been another duo beside, I realized it as I was thinking at Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, has there been another tight end duo that you can recall, Pat, that's been top 12, like 2 tight ends inside the top 12?
Oh, man. Yeah, the Gronk Hernandez thing. That's like the only thing that really came to mind.
We can think of it in the chat. Guess what, chat? If you guys have that duo, put it in the comments below. Love to see if you guys can come up with it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I think sustainability is kind of the biggest question. Billy, you're like essentially, I think, with us. I think you've got Isaiah Likely at 11. So you're still saying he is startable. It's going to get dicey about the type of guys you're balancing him against, but like, he's a startable play. Do you think these guys can maintain being top 12 tight ends together the rest of the year, Billy?
No, I think we're going to see, I mean, there's going to be weeks where I think they definitely do it just because they lack the receivers. So I think we're going to see a lot of 12 personnel. But the biggest thing for me is that I think that we're going to have kind of hot and cold weeks between the 2 of them. If we see this type of usage at a Likely one week and Mark Andrews maybe is getting, peppered by coverage, then they're going to lean to Likely, and vice versa. I think if Likely is not getting open, then they're going to be able to run, the slants and get across the middle of the field with Mark Andrews, and we're going to see him kind of taking the lead for that week as well. And they're going to lean into almost like a hot hand approach at running back. So I hate to say it, but maybe we're going to see a split between the overall target shares throughout the course of the season between the 2 tight ends. But I definitely think it's within the realm of possibilities.
Tight ends disappointed last week. Like, there's just no doubt about it. Overall, all the major big, Likely didn't, of course, but he probably was on a lot of people's benches or the wire. Most tight ends disappointed last week, and a lot of people are dealing with that. So the positive is there's only room to grow. One tight end that did not disappoint was Brock Bowers, and Pat brought him up just a couple minutes ago. He is ECR 10. This is essentially where he was last week. It was like 11, 12, 10, like somewhere in that range. I am the most aggressive of all of us on Brock Bowers. And Pat, you're right there as well. I have him at tight end 6 this week. Pat, you've got him at 7. Billy, you've got him at 8. We are all above consensus. He looks like a full go. Pat, you preached Brock Bowers all off season long. You and Bogman, 2 of the highest on him. He was banged up going into this game, looked great, got his targets. That's not going to change. he looks of the making of a top 5 tight end rest of season. We just don't have enough to start being comfortable with there, but that is where we are trending. We are all on the side of Brock Bowers. So Pat, why don't you give us a Brock Bowers positive reinforcement?
Yeah, now you're almost making me feel guilty, Welsh, for not having him ranked higher at only tight end 7. But team high 8 targets for the Raiders in his NFL debut, and he's just really, really good. Like, don't question the talent. I think he does have a case for maybe being the best tight end prospect to ever enter the NFL. I'm not saying he's going to be the best tight end of all time, but like Gronk didn't come into the league with as much fanfare. I don't think Tony Gonzalez came into the league with the fanfare that Bowers has. Like, this guy was a stud from the get-go as an 18-year-old freshman at Georgia. He's just fantastic.
And I love getting him in there. Final one, Billy, we're going to ask you on this one because I know where our ranks are. I didn't have Likely available. One league I played in Likely wasn't picked up. So there wasn't a lot of like tight end equity I could get involved in, except for this player, Colby Parkinson. And we know there's no Puka for 4 weeks. Obviously, Demarcus Robinson was a heavy pickup. Cooper Kupp definitely is the guy, of course. But Parkinson seems to be able to open up his share, his target share, at least for the next month, if nothing. ECR's got him at tight end top 15. Pat's got him at 16. I put him almost as a top 12 this week. And I think I'm still, I may have moved Njoku off. I know we're still waiting for all of that. I think he could be a top 12 at the end of the day because of the target share. And I was able to pick him up in multiple spots on the waivers. Where are you on Colby Parkinson this week as far as where he ranks and what the ceiling looks like?
I have him at tight end 13. Got to love the usage. I mean, this is a guy that we saw 82% of the routes last week, and I think that goes up with the Puka Nacua news. He saw 10% of the targets. He caught every single one of his targets, 100% catch rate, which is things that you like to see from a new tight end, I guess you'd say, inside of that position here for the Rams. And so it breaks down to usage. It breaks down to necessity. I think Demarcus Robinson is probably the next guy up. I don't have quite as much faith in Tyler Johnson. So I think that, Colby Parkinson is going to get his chance and his opportunities. And I think you can make an argument for him to be inside the top 12. I have him just outside, but got to like the fact that, the Rams are going to be passing a lot this season. And I think that Colby Parkinson is going to be heavily involved in their game plans. And
I think you and I are like lockstep here. Pat, you're a tiny bit higher on him. You agree with this usage over the short period of time? What's your take on Colby Parkinson?
Yeah, Billy mentioned the targets. I mean, Parkinson played 69 out of 78 snaps for the Rams in week 1. And, Isaiah Likely was obviously the hot tight end pickup of the week. I think Parkinson might wind up giving the people who picked him up more bang for the buck because they didn't have to go out and spend 40% of their fab budget on Colby Parkinson.
All right, friends, you guys have questions. We just hit a lot of them, but maybe you have more ranked questions. Guess what? My Playbook has got you covered. Waiver assistant, trade analyzer, lineup suggestions, pickups to make across the board. It's like having a Fantasy Pros analyst or all of them with you at all times. Go and download the My Playbook app. We also give you opportunities to win cool stuff when you do it, but let all of the work that we do here be your assistant right at your fingertips with the My Playbook app. Download it today and make all of the tough football decisions just a little bit easier, when we're not available and we're not sitting here right with you guys. You guys also have the chance to win that Devontae Smith autographed helmet. All you got to do is make sure you're subscribed. You can go to fantasypros.com/contest, fill out the form, multiple opportunities for your chance to win. And if you want to check out all the rankings we talked about, fantasypros.com/rankings. Critical this week to kind of keep on it because there's a lot of big questions that we propose and we talked about, but we just don't have answers to. David Njoku, Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane. We're still waiting on some answers that are some critical points as we get to the end here. All right, that is going to do it. Thank you, Billy Muzio. Make sure to check him out on the Twitters. Pat Fitzmaurice, the king of the kings here at Fantasy Pros. I'm Chris Welsh. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We got tons of content this week to get you set. More week 2 coming up. It's Fantasy Pros. It's the football podcast, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.